there may be others to ask. I think we've got about 15 minutes, don't we, for any questions. So who would like to start proceedings? This is when no one puts up their hands. By the end, everyone will have a hand up. So some of us have to be very brave. There you go, madam.
Where do you stand on circuses?
Mm.
Take your children to a circus?
Where do I stand on circuses? I'm going to be asked all sorts of questions now. Circus, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Yes, I've been to circus. I've been to Gifford Circus, which is a non-animal circus. They do use horses there. It's a very tough one. You know, as we all know, Anne the elephant, which I recount the tale in the book, was recently rescued from a circus and has gone to live at Longleat, and she had been abused. I think, as in any, I imagine there are some circuses that look after animals brilliantly. Personally, because of the nature of how circuses work and lots of travelling, lots of time on the roads, lots of animals need to be kept in cages, I don't really think animals should be kept in circuses anymore, if I'm to be honest. Zoos and safari parks, if I have to start debating the whole thing, I think a safari park where animals have huge amounts of land to roam is one thing. City zoos is getting a little bit more debatable, but the same thing comes into it. There's lots of people who live in urban areas who don't get the chance to see animals even in safari parks out in rural areas. So it is a very difficult issue. I don't really think animals should be in circuses in answer to your question. I will take our kids to the circus, but there's some very clever circuses now that don't require animals. Humans could do very strange things. I watched the opening of the Olympics. Yes, Anna.
Similar question, what about dancing dogs like
Dancing dogs, that's a really interesting debate. I presented crafts for a number of years with Claire Balding, and some of you may know the reason that crafts left the BBC was because of this whole debate about the Kennel Club's requirements for breed standards. And this is I'm sure there are going to be some breeders in here, so I kind of want to tread carefully, but I also feel that I have to be honest about my opinions. I didn't approve of some of the Kennel Club's requirements that are detrimental to animals' health. And I think most of you know the topic I'm talking about here, that some of the breed standards are more about aesthetics and look than they are about the breed. So a number of different breeds are suffering problems because the skulls are too small and the brains are touching the sides, and there's epilepsy is increasing. My beloved dog Inca, my late Inca, she suffered from epilepsy for her last 7 years of her life. She had fits every 2 weeks. And my father has said that was down to being a pedigree dog inbreeding. It's literally this very narrow gene pool that we've created. I personally think that these, what we call designer dogs, which we should get away from that term. Designer dogs where we mix breeds together, Labradoodles being the kind of most famous, Cockapoos, all of them, is the way forward. It's what we need to do. How did we create these breeds in the first place? It was by mixing breeds up, and the genes have become too diluted. And one of the reasons the BBC left was the BBC also did an expose about these character traits that were required. And I must admit, I was very happy that the BBC pulled the coverage of Crufts until and the Kennel Club still haven't budged. They still haven't changed those requirements, and I've kind of severed links with Crufts for now until they change. And I believe they are working towards that, which brings us on to dancing dogs. You know, we all watched on Britain's Got Talent. We've seen it many times. Dancing dogs have performed at Crufts for many years. It's a hard one. Now we can start getting into, equestrian events and eventing and dressage. I don't know enough about the damage it might do to the dog's legs. A dog is made to walk on all fours. I'm not sure how long they should be walking on their rear legs, and from what I've read, that they're trying to cut down the amount of time that a dog is made to walk on its back legs. I think it goes without saying it can't be particularly good for a dog that's built to be on all fours. So I think we probably do need to have a little bit of regulation. I sound like a real sourpuss there, but it is the unfortunate nature of a show like Britain's Got Talent is that suddenly everyone is going to want to go out and dance with their dog. And that's fantastic for people to work. We work with dogs in many different ways, and it's fantastic to have this relationship where you can do something with your dog. And you know, the young girl that had Pudsey, for example, and many others, that is their life, and they've created a career out of it, and it's their best friend. So I would never want to deprive them of that, but I think probably we need to start thinking about the damage it might do to the dog, some of the tricks they do. I think jumping onto your back and stuff is fine. That's what dogs do, if you're going to say. They do it when they're doing sheepdog trials. So I think most of it is fine. There might be some elements of the dancing, and I'm not an expert here, that might need to be... these are good questions today. We're really putting you on the spot now. Half of you are going to love me and half of you are going to hate me. Right, any more questions from anyone? Yes, no? So this is, can I talk about my plans for the Atlantic? So some of you may or may not know my future plans are to swim across the Atlantic. And this was born out of this other obsession I have with the Atlantic Ocean. And the Atlantic has always been a significant part of me, and it's actually been... The Atlantic has kind of had the key tipping points in my life. So when I went to live on Taranto in the North Atlantic, that changed my whole career, or created a career, I'd argue, and changed the whole course of my life. And the next big changing point was when I rode across it with James Cracknell, going east to west. And I've got this thing about this circle. I wanted to complete this circle. I don't know why. It's one of these strange obsessions that I've always had. And I've been wondering how I was going to cross the Atlantic back and go from America back to Cornwall, back to England. And swimming is not something I'm very good at. I don't really like swimming. I'm not very good at swimming. But even as a child, I remember going down to Cornwall and down to Devon, down to the West Country, and standing on a beach and splashing around in the water, running away from it as it was chasing me up the beach, wondering if I got into that water and just carried on, what would happen. I'd probably be rescued by the Coast Guard, is the answer. But I started doing research about the possibilities of swimming across it. And I think I wanted one big challenge to kind of to stake me. Lots of the challenges that I've done, anyone who heard my talk about the Accidental Adventurer will know, my pursuit for adventure has been all about overcoming my inferiority complexes, about failing all my exams, being the worst at sport at school, and never being very good at anything. And suddenly discovering something that I can achieve seems to be adventures on a larger scale. Give me a marathon, I'm hopeless. If I have to run 26 miles, I'll take hours and hours and hours. But give me a multi-marathon that lasts for 7 days, and I'll be brilliant. Not brilliant, but I'll be fine. I'll get through it. It's getting carried away now. It's all this God talk. I wanted one final challenge. James, my friend James Cracknell, as many of you may know, had a terrible accident a few years ago, and suffered a brain injury that has lasted ever since. And we had planned to do a big adventure together, and that had to be put on hold, and he's still recovering. So I think it was while thinking about all of that, and I've got young kids, and I realise as they get a little bit older, I probably want to spend more and more time with them. But while they're young, this is my last opportunity to do that, and that's how this rather crazy idea was born. So the plan is to try it next year, maybe the year after, and hopefully become the first person really to have completely swum across the Atlantic Ocean. And I know it seems strange, a lot of people can't quite get their head around it, but I think it's something that I need to do to kind of cleanse those inferiorities that I've had for many, many years, and then I'm happy just mucking around with parrots and ferrets. Any other questions? Yes.
You've clearly had many, many animal encounters. Is there any animal that you would really like to at least see that you haven't had the opportunity to?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very lucky to see a great deal of animals over the years. There are lots of animals that I'd still love to see. I haven't seen gorillas in the wild, and that would be a lifelong dream. In fact, apes, I haven't had a chance to see. So I think that would definitely be my dream, going off to see gorillas. Any other questions anyone has?
I think that was the next
Oh, yes.
one, last question.
Yes, yes. Just that one.
I was just wondering, you were saying that you work on the test trials in Kenya. What do you think about legalising the trade of ivory? Like the sort of point of view that will help prevent the poaching still going on?
So the question was about Tusk, one of the charities I work for. One of the big problems facing not just Africa but the Far East is poaching, and poaching for animal skins, ivory in particular, one of the big ones. And I've been out with anti-poaching units. Huge amounts of money goes into it. People lose their lives. It creates livelihoods. It's a fantastically complex debate, but poaching is decimating huge herds of animals in Africa. And one of the debates is, do you legalise the trade in ivory? A bit like legalising drugs. The debate is, if you legalise it and you start controlling it, perhaps will reduce the wanton murder, as I describe this, of many of these creatures. I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer. There's a huge amount of ivory that's it being confiscated that is around that can be used. There's massive amounts, and there's always going to be a demand for it. That's one of the great problems. And it's a little bit like drugs. There will always be a demand for drugs. So what do we do? I suspect that if animals have to be culled, this is another whole debate which I go into in the book, which is a very complex one, when you see great herds of elephants that have to be culled in Africa, but it happens. When too many animals live in one very small area, you need to do it. So there is access to ivory from culled animals, and that's why in many parts of Africa you can buy elephant meat and you can buy rhino meat, and it comes from a culled animal, so effectively from a sustainable source, which you could argue is no different than coming from cattle, because people and animals have to live, have to share this land. I suspect some form of legalisation of controlling the market of ivory that is around is one of the answers. I don't think you'll ever entirely get rid of poaching, but something does have to be done, because it's devastating in many corners of the world. I think we have run out of time now. Thank you very much. You are, as I've already mentioned, you were my very first audience for this book tour, so I apologise for any rambling, but I hope you've enjoyed some of the anecdotes and some of the stories. I know that I'm going to be doing a book signing afterwards, so feel free to come up, chat, and if you would like to, you can buy a copy.
Just like to add a few words on top of that. Just for tonight, rather like some of the features Ben is trying to say, your ticket's extinguished and become extinct. Basically, you get £6-7 off the book, which makes it £11 or £12.
Well,
it is actually. It's fantastic. It's very, very thought-provoking, but enjoyably thought-provoking, because if I told you earlier evening we're going to be discussing conservation, ethics, eating meat, being vegetarian, you thought, God, how dull this could be, but it hasn't been. It's been great. One of the things you didn't know was that, well, you probably do in some ways, that we're launching an autumn festival this year, and one of the people who we desperately wanted was Ben. The only date he could do it was this. In a way, he's in fact the first event the festival we're having. It's quite special actually, and I'm really glad he's done it. Thank you to everyone for coming. If everyone wants to, there's a copy in the shop if you want to pop in by night. But let's just give a warm applause